connect with Maryanne. She posted her LinkedIn in the chat. All right, so let's start. Can you guys hear me okay on Zoom?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Allison and I'll be moderating today's Women in Blockchain panel. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the Blockchain Club. We are a new club that just started this semester. Our mission is to cultivate a blockchain and crypto hub with all Northeastern students and alumni through education, hands-on research, and tech development so that we can become valuable contributors to the global blockchain ecosystem. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Before we start today's panel, I'd like to introduce our speakers who are today. First, we have Caroline. Caroline is a member of the Boston Blockchain Association's Board of Directors and a disruptive career designer at Career Cool Hunter, where she focuses on disruptive industries such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, automation, and crypto economics. Next, we have Maryanne. Maryanne is the chairman, CEO, and founder of Ninth Gear Technologies, which is a fintech startup that optimizes liquidity management by powering foreign exchange trades. Next, we have Lynne. Lynne is the founder of Transformational Strategies, LLC, a global consulting business. She is also currently the interim chair of the Boston Blockchain Association. Last but not least, we have Kristin. Kristin is a managing director at InBlock, a digital asset servicing platform that uses blockchain tech to optimize working capital management for corporations, banks, and insurance companies. All right, so now let's dive right into our first question. So this question is for everyone. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to where you are today? And maybe we can start with Kristin.
Sure. Thank you for having me. First of all, appreciate you guys coming out this evening. My name is Kristen Machad. I started early career in corporate America and I graduated with a biology degree, so nothing in the finance or tech field. So I was going to be a doctor, molecular biology and kinesiology, if you imagine that. And worked throughout IBM in their financial services practice. So had worked with a lot of their healthcare practice participants, and then found and loved the digital side. Worked in IT and finance for some time, and then switched over to GE Capital, which was one of the most complex global multinational companies that had a very complex treasury organization. So I love treasury because you had to problem solve there, and a lot of biology and science and tech is about solving big world challenges. And so I picked a big company to go do that at. 2 years ago, I decided to switch over to LiquidX, which is a fintech company. We're backed by Broadridge. Broadridge runs the major back office for a lot of the big banks. And what I went over there to do is to actually build out a platform called InBlock that actually solves a problem I had in the corporate space, right? So we were constantly having individuals in our shared service centers track down invoices, purchase orders, payments. And so I went over to LiquidX because the CEO had shared a similar vision about really digitizing that and using blockchain to enable the connectivity of the data and the processing around invoices, purchase orders, and then being able to go and sell those, monetize those out in the financial network. And so that's what I do today. I run their InBlock business. So came in as a product person and kind of moved up and am running the business now and doing sales and strategy and product development, which is really cool stuff. So it's nice to meet all of you. Thank you.
Caroline, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you to everybody in the Blockchain Club, and thanks for joining us tonight. So my name's Caroline Dennis, and I like to think that I help people create and design careers that don't suck. And that might sound kind of glib, but I'm serious about it. I started in the fundraising world, working for schools, higher education, and museum fundraising, but really decided that starting my own thing would be super fun, which I did along with my husband, and we built 2 companies, both in IT professional services. One was an IT security firm, and the other was a wireless internet company that was serving rural New Mexico in the Southwest. So it basically, like, I got thrown in the bathwater very quickly in technology world. It was not my first career, but what I actually discovered blockchain and crypto was through volunteering at DEF CON, which is an IT security conference in Las Vegas. And that just struck me. It just blew me away. And I think what I was so impressed by, the more so the idea of the technology than the technology itself, was this idea of transparency and fairness and equity. And there were so many cool ideas and things thrown around. So that's where I kind of started. And now I help students and professionals really visualize what not just blockchain and crypto careers are like, but every area within that disruptive tech spectrum. And then help them leverage connections and context through people and communities. And I do this as well for startup founders and help them make strategic connections. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then would you like to go next?
Sure, and I want to thank you, Allison, and the whole crew at Northeastern. You guys have been very supportive of not only Boston Blockchain Association, but it's just really great to be here. So I came a very traditional route. I started my career in what is called banking school, which doesn't even exist anymore. So it was a two-year program where you spent about a year in class. So it was like another MBA. And then you went into rotations in 3 different areas of the bank. And then you came out and you were kind of like, up for grabs. So you had to bid on opportunities. Long story short, I went into a consulting group at the bank, and I loved it because it was very fast paced, and I got to see a lot of companies and what they did and how they did it. Turned out that most of the companies that I was doing projects for were in the financial services, a lot of asset managers, brokerage firm, financial institutions, a lot of brokers. And so I really started to develop a real interest in that financial sector. And then I moved from that into a group that was calling on asset managers. And at the time, they were really mutual funds, brokers, insurance companies, and banks. That kind of put them all in one bucket, financial services. And I stayed at that company for a very long time. And in 2003 was approached by Bank of New York Mellon to run their asset management group. And I decided to take it. And I say this only because I want women to know this. At the time, my children were young and the job was in New York. And I said, I really want the job, but I can't do the job because I can't take my kids out of the school they were in. And so the guy that was hiring me said, I can do everything else you want, but I can't do that. Like, you cannot work at home. We have to figure, it's just not going to work. So I hung up and I said, okay, I get it. 3 months later, he called me and said, you are the only person at the bank. I had to go to the vice chairman of the bank, which is, second in command, to get you the opportunity to work from home. On one condition, you can't tell anybody. So they had this whole thing rigged up. I mean, it's kind of a funny story today because, obviously you have to be old enough to believe that was the way it was before COVID, right? So I did that, and then ran the asset management group, which was all of the funds, hedge funds, private equity, et cetera. And about 2016, Bank of New York Mellon was very involved in BK Coin. So they did a project with Ripple, and I got invited to attend a meeting. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really crazy. This is really nuts. And then as I started to call my clients, they were asking me about blockchain, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So I went to my boss and asked, I need to take a class. I need to do something outside of the traditional work world to do that. I did that. And just, as people say, went down the rabbit hole. And then in 2017 was approached by a serial entrepreneur to start a company that had a blockchain component. We started that company. We sold it last year, just pre-COVID. And so from that time on, I really started doing a lot of consulting work in the blockchain crypto space. I work with a lot of financial institutions trying to help them manage and maneuver this marketplace. I'm also working on a carbon credit project, which is pretty fulsome in the carbon credit exchange area. So never know where it will go. And then recently just became the chair of the Boston Blockchain Association. So I am interim at the moment. Who knows? I'm hoping I can manage all of them. So very excited to be here. Thank you all. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Lynn. And Maryanne, would you like to go?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks for sticking around tonight. And it's after hours, and really appreciate everyone's interest in what we're about to say here. I have 29 years of experience in capital markets, institutional finance. Like Kristin, I studied math and science. I thought that I was going to go full on into the math and science world. And I studied material science engineering as my first degree. And then I studied finance and then law. And when I came out, I started working on Wall Street and was really immersed in many different structures and the way that information flowed. And while banks and financial institutions look really sleek and sexy, markets, especially capital markets, they operate in a very primitive way. And they're now a digital incarnation of what we think about as pen and paper. But many of the systems are manual. There are still faxes that are going around. And there's this surprising lack of technological advancement and antiquated systems. And so when I first heard about blockchain, I was living in Boston at the time. I now live out in Silicon Valley. But when I was there, I looked at a system in a meetup kind of like this. I went to a meeting in 2009. And halfway through the session, I just got up and left because it was all about overthrowing government authority and monetary systems. And I just was like, yeah, that's never going to happen. And while things are still very nascent today, they're very different than the way that they used to be. And I do see some institutional adoption of some of the systems that are happening in the blockchain space or distributed ledger technology. In 2017, I called 100 financial institutions and I asked them two questions. What are you doing with blockchain and what are you doing with crypto? People laughed at me, except for Fidelity that told me that you could use it in their cafeteria. So they're definitely way above. And I know that Abby put server farms in her office so she could see how mining actually worked. But looking at this technology in 2017, the light bulb went off for me because I said, if I can harness this technology, we can fundamentally change the way that finance works and also eliminate the breaks, the reconciliation errors, and the corrections that are just plaguing capital markets. We're focusing on foreign exchange, and many of the systems in foreign exchange are still from 1973. That is way before most of you were born, and they're still working in that way. And when you have to trade multi-million dollars or even $1 billion institution to institution, you have to pick up something that looks like this, a phone, and make a phone call. A lot of the trades are still going through voice and they take 48 hours. So there's this dislocation between time zones, geographies, currency, and risk. And using blockchain or distributed ledger technologies, we can very much implement market structures that eliminate the settlement risk, harmonize the markets so they settle on the same basis. There are still instruments that settle T+20, which is 20 business days out. And we can stop the delays and settlement failures. So that's what we're working on at Ninth Gear. And so when I started this company, I very much looked into the future and said, what can we do with this technology and how can we harness it? I kind of look at what happened in 2007 when the iPhone first came out. It was impossible for me to think about some of the things that we can do today, like Uber and Lyft. I know that many of you Venmo or even use Revolut. Those types of systems we couldn't have thought about before 2000. So now is the time to think about what can we do with this new technology and what can we solve? We are very much a solution that's not looking for a problem. There are problems that exist that we can solve by harnessing this technology.
Thank you, Maryanne. That's awesome. Jumping back a little bit, Kristin, you mentioned that you worked for IBM and GE. Both of which are very large companies and you worked for a very long time. So I'm curious what made you decide to switch to a smaller company and what were some of the differences between the two systems?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you'd have asked me early in the career, I would have measured success by the number of people who worked for me. But the more people that ended up working under me at companies in my prior career, I felt like disconnected from like that kind of energy that woke me up every morning. Don't get me wrong, I love managing people. I love coaching, mentoring, but I started to move away from like kind of the core of kind of running a business, that product design, that kind of light in your belly. Like Lynn mentioned, I worked on a blockchain pilot kind of mid-career at GE, and I just thrived in that kind of environment. And so when this opportunity came up, when a recruiter had reached out, I actually was in a really great spot, and people question, they're like, "Are you nuts? You're leaving this great role, like you just got promoted to this level that's like everybody wants to be at, and now you're going to leave." And for me, it was really about that kind of career inflection of wanting to do something different. The smaller company gave me an opportunity to potentially go and run a business, which is what I'm doing today. I could have done that at GE, but I wouldn't have had that breadth of creating a business plan, working with our board, going out and finding investors, being the head of HR, the CFO, right? You get this kind of great opportunity in these smaller companies by really working across and owning that. And so that's why I switched. And I think at the time people thought I was nuts, but I think now you fast forward to a couple of years later, they're like, I get it. I see how, that energy kind of ignites you. And I encourage you guys to think about that too as you're going out. Sometimes other people's perception of success may be different than your own, right? What wakes you up in the morning might be different for everybody, right?
Great, thank you. So now I guess we can shift into more industry-specific questions. So my first question, this is to everyone. What areas in blockchain are you most excited about and see a positive future projection? And maybe we can start with Lynne.
Yeah, I guess so. From my perspective, I was in the institutional business all the time. So I never called on sort of retail clients or never knew the retail industry that much. So for me, the thing that I was very excited about an ETF, right, in crypto. I'm very excited about crypto. I really, I think we can't even imagine some of the things that are going to come out of this. And I have to put blockchain because it's the technology, but also the digital asset. And so everything about it really excites me. But I think the thing that is most exciting is when I look at companies, like MicroStrategy, Galaxy Digital, Tesla is another good example, who actually make a commitment and say, you know what, I believe in this so strongly. Even some of these companies like Skybridge Capital and others, they're investing enormous amounts of dollars in, crypto assets. And I have friends in the financial industry who think I'm totally off my rocker. Like, what? I mean, this thing doesn't exist. It doesn't even, how do you value this thing? It's so volatile. But it is kind of this belief system. And when you come from traditional finance and you see all the problems, Maryanne, you mentioned them, Kristin, you mentioned them, it's like every day you just want to pull the hair out of your head. Like, you've got to be kidding me, that foreign exchange, for this $1 billion transaction, number one, there was a huge haircut taken out of it because it came from Japan or whatever. And then it takes 25 days for it to get there. It's a very challenging environment. And so I guess the thing I'm most excited about is that companies would actually look at it, have it on their balance sheet, that it's like normal thing to have it on your balance sheet, and that it's really an institutional play. And I think it is becoming very rapidly moving in that direction. And that excites me because that's the world that I know. And I just feel like we are on the verge of this enormous adoption that's just going to be like a tidal wave. And I guess the only thing that sort of disappoints me about it is that, it is when I think it was designed, the technology and the math behind it was designed with everybody gets a piece of the action, and, you too can be part of this. And what disappoints me at this point is it really is, big money, big this, big that. I think there's still room. But, a lot of the big banks are getting into it, certainly the Goldmans and the Morgan Stanleys. And, so that's sort of a disappointment for me because I wanted it to be, I think, more of the great equalizer, right? That anybody could get in. And I think you can, but I do see that, financial institutions are sort of capitalizing on it. But I'd like to see more of it on companies' balance sheets. that would be very exciting for me.
I think that you definitely brought up a really good point. Caroline, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think what I'm excited about a lot of aspects of what is happening today in blockchain. The one big area that I think is still people are somewhat skeptical about is in medicine and research and all of the different ways that there are projects and successes happening for creating a situation where people have self-sovereignty as patients, as themselves, because our healthcare system has been built around this idea of having centralized entities where the person who is the patient has very little control and understanding of where their information is. So I am very involved in the global health and World Health Organizations that are doing really exciting work to create new systems. And those are challenging because this is such a heavily regulated part of the world. But there are some incredible, I shared some resources around some work that's being done in the NFT space and some people who are doing that. And I'll share that afterwards, Allison. But that's one area. The other one is just the NFTs themselves and digital scarcity and what kind of really exciting ways that people can apply those in different settings, also in healthcare, but also in, I've got a shout out to Lisa Fosdick, who's here with us tonight. She's from NFTs for Charity. Well, there's so many ways that people are able to benefit the philanthropic world in ways that we really couldn't do before. So I think that there's so many interesting applications for NFTs, and I think we're just starting to understand those. And then just dear to my heart is all of the interplay between industries. So industries like the XR space, immersive technology, is doing some incredible stuff to start to blend in blockchain and crypto and the immersive tech space. The music industry, and that also can relate to NFTs, but it also relates to ownership of things or incentivization of talent communities. So people are giving back and creating these communities. So for me, it's like that, there's so many to think about. So I think that it just makes it really, just really exciting. I guess that's a important way of saying it, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. And I see Maryanne, you're very eager to unmute yourself. So would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So the internet has created data and it just unleashed the data. I see that blockchain or distributed ledger technology is a protocol for trust so that we can trust the technology. I am not a crypto maximalist. I think that there are still things that a relational database absolutely is far more superior. So if the problem exists and it can be solved with blockchain, that is great. I do not think that applying blockchain for all situations is the way to go. And I see so many, especially out here in the Valley, Silicon Valley, there's just so many crypto focused funds. And for us, we don't get attention because we are only using crypto for part of our solution, not for all of our solution. The off ramps and the on ramps, they still have a tremendous amount of work to be done on that. But for some situations like personal identity, like Caroline mentioned, I get phished all the time. And so if I could have a situation where my email, I could trust the email and trust what was coming in, I would be so excited if someone could solve that. NFTs, having Boss Beauty's NFT be featured on the New York Stock Exchange, that was really an exciting thing that happened last week. So if you're not following Boss Beauty's NFT on Twitter, you definitely should. They're doing some really great work in that.
Awesome. I guess a follow-up question to you, Maryanne, since you do work in a tech company. So what do you think are some use cases of blockchain technology that you're currently seeing or that you're working with?
Sure. So we're working in capital markets, and the way that we're applying our blockchain is more of a shadow accounting mechanism. So ledgers and are just a prime example. So if you can have one ledger, a single immutable source of trust for a transaction, that just eliminates so much of the back office costs. We anticipate that you can reduce costs that I can quantify by 38%. I believe it's way higher because everybody's doing transaction cost accounting. Everybody is looking at what is the actual cost for a transaction to go through. Many people cannot, at large institutions, cannot quantify the actual cost of a transaction going through. So for us to be able to eliminate a lot of just the cleanup efforts on it, it's just a perfect example. But we're applying something in a very different, what we consider a more elegant way. We're not moving something in and out of cryptocurrency because that adds too much volatility. So taking a transaction that is 48 hours on a good day, we've condensed that down to 55 seconds. And that has a lot of financial firms really excited about. I mean, when we're sitting across from them and we say that we can do this 55 seconds, their eyes just like get as wide as saucers because it just eliminates so much of the back office cleanup.
Thank you. And Kristen, would you like to go back to the positive future projection for blockchain question?
Sure, I may combine them into one because I think that the biggest piece for me is really that transparency and linkage of what we call the assets. So, you know, in the company I work for, you have banks and asset managers that purchase these invoices, let's say, or purchase orders or inventory from a corporate and finance them, right? So they give working capital benefit by paying at a discount, and then they finance these assets. They then can distribute them right out to other banks. So some of the big tier banks will purchase those assets and then sell them off. Well, imagine fraud in that space. So how do I know where this invoice I'm purchasing from came from? How do I know that somebody else hasn't already funded that? Because we've seen in the financial network that there's been fraud in the space. And then when I go and I resell that, how do I stand behind that risk as well and give transparency? And to me, the blockchain is one of the few technologies that can actually provide that shared party transparency, right? I'd echo too what Maryanne said. I went and built a reconciliation tool, but actually, if we get this right, we don't have to reconcile a transaction because we're actually looking at one shared ledger. And so it actually removes in the processing that I do with the corporates, actually removes the need for one of the products we built over time as they scale in our platform. So a couple of really good use cases that can hopefully evolve over the next few years as people get more comfortable, right?
Thank you, Kristen. So now we'll shift into more woman-specific questions. So as a woman working in male-dominant fields like finance, fintech, and blockchain, what do you do to ensure that your voice is being heard? And maybe we can start with Caroline.
One big word, communities. There are so many incredible communities that are full of both allies as well as women in all kinds of different industries. So there's several in blockchain space. There's a Global Women in Blockchain, there's the Bigger Pie, there's a whole host of them. And Allison, I think I shared a doc with you earlier, which feel free to share that out. And then the other thing is that, you know, the word smoke and mirrors we used to use in the consulting and the IT space, because a lot of times people would come to us and say, you know, I want to patch together 12 locations of my business together, and we're running VPNs and we're doing all these complicated things. Can you do that? And a lot of times we said, yes, we can. And we had to in so many cases, we had to produce that stuff on the fly a lot of times and learn as we went. But I do think that we have to also, as women and people who are disadvantaged in this industry, to just set aside that everyone is learning. It doesn't matter how incredibly astute and bright and how long you've been doing it and when you discovered crypto and how many years. It just helps me to know that I really just focus on the fact that I know everyone's learning. They may not admit that they are, but they are. And if you can find those people who are willing to show and teach and learn and mentor, and there are a lot of them, and there are many men included in that. That's where I find myself most. And I think that there are enough communities and speaker bureaus and a lot of other communities that are asking women, come talk to us. Let's get your voice out there. How can how can we help you? So for me, it's all about people.
Thank you, Caroline. So for all the links and resources mentioned in this meeting, we'll put everything onto a Medium doc and we'll share that out tomorrow. So don't be scared if you're not getting all the links right now. So next up, Lynne, would you like to go?
Can you repeat the question? I apologize. I lost a little bit of that, so.
Yeah, sorry. So my question was, as a woman working in male-dominant fields like finance, fintech, blockchain, what do you do to ensure that your voice is being heard?
Well, I guess the best advice I have is ask for it, like just ask for what you need, because I've always worked in finance. I was probably the only woman in the room, in the group for a very long time. I've had over 30 years in financial services. And I think that what women don't do and what we need to do more is ask for what we need to keep whether it's mental health, physical health, whatever it is, right, to keep ourselves on, performing at our best. And when I did that at the bank, even though it was quite revolutionary, I think that other people stood up and took notice, and it became an accepted way. And many people shared with me, many men shared with me, gee, no one ever asked, I have this woman who's great, but she needs to work 3 days a week or whatever. And so I think, I feel like I think that all of us don't ask for what we need, women, I think especially. So I know that's not really, in blockchain, but I think whatever it is that you have to make what you need known. And so I guess that's sort of the advice I have, whether it's men or women in the room, whatever. And I think it's easier now, but you have to keep doing that. So.
Allison, I think you're on mute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So this next question is directly to Maryanne. So when starting your tech company, could you tell us a little bit about some of the fundraising challenges that you face as a woman compared to your male counterparts?
Yes, and I'm going to kind of go back to the last question. I've always worked in male-dominated fields, from being the only female in my honors physics class at my freshman year at Cornell to being in capital markets. And I'm used to being the only one in the room. I've taken 2 scaling blockchain classes at Stanford, and most of it was me talking to the professor and then a lot of guys on camera on mute. So I'm very comfortable being in a male-dominated industry. However, I was very ill prepared for the fact that women do not raise money at the same level as men. And it is not 50-50, 60-40, 75-25. Women raise 1.7% as a female founder as compared to men. So 98.3%, let me just do the math for you, 98.3% goes to men, 1.7 goes to women. So let me just explain this to the people in the back row. That is really tough. And so we have raised, I'm very proud to say we've raised 4.2 million as of this morning. It is hand-to-hand combat. And sometimes when they find out that it's a female founded company, or that we have a lot of women in female positions, because we're pretty equal men and women, they're like, yeah, I'm not going there. And I have sat across from a guy with a collared shirt and a puffy jacket in Silicon Valley that never asked me one question as the CEO or looked at me the entire meeting. So I just stopped talking because I don't want their money anyway. So it's something that just has to be discussed. It needs to change. There's a lot of talk about it, and women in particular need to become angel investors and give back as an accredited investor $200,000 or more as an individual, $300,000 or more as a household, or $1 million or more in investable assets outside of your primary residence. So most people that, you know, have that much money in their 401k outside of their primary residence, once you get to a certain level, and especially at jobs, the average blockchain developer is 200,000 or more first year. So this is not a huge amount of threshold, but giving back and writing checks is really important to lift the tide of all boats. And so we are so close to getting into Series A. We're just about ready to get into an association with many banks and individuals. And so we're finishing up development next week. It's a very exciting time. However, getting these checks, it takes all my waking hours.
Thank you for sharing, Maryanne, and hopefully that was inspiring to the women in this call. My last question would be to Kristin. So looking at the blockchain space in the next 5 years, what areas do you think women will likely take part in?
I think women will take part in every aspect of it, right? I mean, even through these discussions, like I've met Caroline and Maryanne now, and Lynne I knew from my prior life, right? Not only are we here to help each other, and others are helping us, right? And that's not just a women to women thing, that's our networks, right? Are helping each other, but we're here to help the next generation of folks. And that's something I'm really proud of, is making sure that we set an example too, to kind of bring up, I don't want the next Maryanne to come through and have to struggle to get funding, because she's freaking awesome, right? So she deserves like hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into her company, right? And so I think that's the future to me, is women running these big companies, but collaborating, right? It should be a diversity of thought and leadership. You know, it's not just a male female thing, right? And that should be at every level. I'm frustrated. Our technology team is 99% men, right? I want to see those female blockchain developers come through my company, and I will seek out those individuals for the most qualified individuals and help encourage that, right? And I hope that that's not something we have to do proactively in 5 years, that's something that's more natural in the ecosystem.
Lynne, do you have something to add, or was that?
Well, you know, that really nailed it. But I would say, I think that Maryanne said it correctly. You know, as women like myself come up through their careers and change their careers and migrate, you know, it's really about giving back. And part of my giving back is, you know, putting my hand out and helping people up, right? And you know, that includes things like writing a check, whether that's, you know, $5, $5,000, whatever that number is. But you know, you can talk about it, but you got to really put the pedal to the metal. And I think that one, in helping other women succeed, and you know, just lending a hand, trying to help them with whatever. So I'm always open if anybody wants to reach out to me, but also writing the checks. I mean, I think Maryanne, you nailed it. That is not happening today. And it's a very frustrating thing. And the only reason my business actually got sold was because of my partner. He was very well connected in that space. And it was okay to have co-partners, co-founders, one being a woman who had financial experience, but it wouldn't have been okay if I was doing it. I can guarantee that. So that has to change. That is absolutely has to change.
Thank you, Lynne. Speaking of help, let's shift gears into our last part of this panel, which is advice for students. So my first question is for Caroline. Do you inspire and advise startups and professionals in helping them with pitches and careers? So what were some of the best pieces of advice you've given?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I learned very early on was that to figure out what your passion and pitch is, whether you're a startup founder or you're a student or you're a professional, is that you really need to dig deep to do that. And to do that, you need to go outward in communities and not treat this as a cookie cutter process. It is not. It is. There's so many different ways to get an understanding about the industry, whether that is participating in meetups, whether it is volunteering for hackathons or projects, whether it is elevating and supporting someone who's doing incredible work in the space. So it's not one thing. And I think that it makes it really hard if you're in college, let's say, and you're focusing on your coursework and you're having to do all of these different things. Your bandwidth is already maxed out. It's hard to do all of the other things outside of your major, outside of your coursework. But I definitely would say that if you're trying to create a career path in it, you can't think of it as a linear process. It's a series of things. And I think one of the things the modern college student to me is so brilliant about is that I think, and maybe I'd be really interested to know what the audience thinks about this, but my experience is that many college students are now saying, we don't want one career and we don't want one source of income. We want multiple. We want to have multiple things going on. So whether we're investors in crypto and we're doing another career. So I really think that that is a different way of thinking. And I think that people who are older need to really take that and pay attention to it, because I think it's a great, to me, it makes a lot of sense. But just in terms of skill building, it's not going to be that, blockchain certification class that's going to get you what you need. I think a lot of it is getting engaged in communities, whether that's volunteering for a hackathon or a project. This group, and I will just give a plug for you, Allison, and for Bennett, that this is the kind of organization that can do a ton of self-teaching, people teaching other people what they know on small micro levels. And that is oftentimes free, and it's powerful. The second piece of advice that I think about is that companies today are an incredible learning resource. So if you look at all of the platforms, whether it's Gemini or Algorand or any of them, they are all doing learning and teaching things all the time. So you just have to tap into, be paying attention to when they're having webinars or hackathons where you can come and learn their tech. To me, the sources of free learning abounds. It doesn't mean that doing cohort-based and more boot camp focused, like the Student Gateway program was, those are incredible ways for you to actually put your hands on a project and try something out. And I think we saw that last summer at the Boston Blockchain. And some of you, I see Melissa Klein is here. I know that there are others who participated in that. That's like, you're getting under the hood. So if you can get under the hood in any way that you can, I do think that that's worthy to think about. And stay away from the Indeed.com and the Monster.com for a long time until you really can get to know some of the companies that are doing that work, because that's where Maryanne's going to see the spark, or Kristin's going to see the spark. They're not going to see them through some, job engine that's going to pipe in. So, yeah, I would say those are the areas where I would say can be really impactful for folks.
Thank you, Caroline. And I guess following up on what you said about the importance of community, maybe Lynne, you can also chime into this answer. So one of the most important aspects of finding career opportunities is to network with professionals working in the space. And so for you, Lynne and Caroline, what kind of work do you do at Boston Blockchain Association, and how has that community benefited you?
I'll let you go, Lynne.
Okay, so, I think the thing to me throughout my career, hiring people, whatever, that's really, really key, especially in this new world, is I call it being hungry, whether it's hungry for intelligence, learn. As Caroline said, there is so much free information out there. Every day I make it a point, because it's such a nascent technology, and because it's such a paradigm shift. Every day I take a podcast. I can give you a list of people, whether it's Anthony Papalano. I mean, every day there's somebody that is talking about this. Michael Saylor, know the people. Gary Gensler, what's happening? Every day I take a podcast, right? It could be 5 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever. I just do that religiously. It's like meditating or whatever. Get out of your comfort zone, get hungry, learn and network. And so, big pitch for the BBA, but we're always looking we have a bunch of working groups. Get involved. We don't have all the answers. This is what the technology is. And so we need young people to come in with, ideas that can help us. And we're open for business. So I guess I would say that, but so get out of your comfort zone, be hungry, whether that's learning on your own or asking somebody who you admire, Maryanne, Kristin, Caroline, how did you do it? Would you be willing to share with me this? We're all happy, and then get involved. I don't think I talked about BBA in terms of but there's a lot of projects. We've got some really exciting speakers. There's a lot of stuff to get involved in. Just reach out to me.
Thank you, Lynn. Before we open the floor to questions from the audience, Kristin and Maryanne, do you guys have any other advice that you'd like to give to our students?
I would just encourage them to constantly believe in themselves. I know it sounds silly, but I've self-doubted myself in every job I take. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do well. And then I surprise myself, because then I become more amazing than I ever thought I could be when I step foot in and I feel confident, right? And so I don't think that that's a male female thing, because I have 3 boys and I see them do the same thing. So I just encourage you, I give them a pep talk, do the same to yourself. Understand that people even with 20, 30 years of experience feel that way as they take new roles and they try new things. But actually doing that is what makes you build your foundation for the next big thing. And so, at least the last 20 years of my career has been on learning, failing, succeeding, learning, failing, succeeding, and so I would encourage you to do the same. I just want you guys to understand that still happens even 20 to 30 years into your career, right?
And Allison, I just want to add, I have 5 quick things. 1, wake up early, get up and read something, do your podcast, jump in and take risks, follow people. Like Christian Carlo from the CFTC has a book that's coming out today or tomorrow, Crypto Dad. Read it from cover to cover, learn what he had to say. He was at the forefront of so many interesting things. Do the work. I read a white paper a week. I tried to do a white paper a day. Now I'm down to 1 a week, but read them. I always learn something interesting. And network, network, network. We have internships available. Every single one of our interns has said to us that they would not have received their first job unless they had worked with us. We have one that's interviewing at Goldman Sachs. I'm hoping that I'm like 6 for 6 on this, but definitely network, because these are the folks that you are going to need to know in order to get those internships and jobs.
Thank you, Maryanne. And also just a plug, Blockchain Club has a reading group. So if you're interested in reading white papers and resources, reach out to us. All right, so we'll open the floor to any questions. Does anyone in the room have any questions for our panelists?
There's a couple in the chat, Allison. There's one from Jack here that I want to answer about NFTs. So
Sure.
Jack, if you've not read A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Michaud, I think that it's still, I read that my freshman year of college, and I think it's still applicable today. I think it's from the 70s. I think that some of these things are tulip bulbs and some of them are actually here to stay, but we're not going to know for a little bit. So I like to try everything. So I like to own a little crypto. I have hot wallets, cold storage, and I haven't bought an NFT yet, but I'm getting ready to.
So for those who didn't know what Jack asked, I'll just read out the question.
I'm sorry.
So, no worries. So Jack asked, I noticed that although NFTs are buzzing, people have trouble articulating their big picture value. So given that ambiguity, is this industry something that maintainable over the course of a decade, or is it a passing fad as critics claim? So,
And Allison, before you go, I just did want to, there was a mention in the doc that you put out there about a talk that Heather Lee Flannery made, and she's from Consensus Health. It's an outstanding way of articulating why the value of the NFT can't be understated, and why that its origins really didn't, that it actually was in many ways the precursor to crypto. It just had been produced in a different manner through CryptoKitties, and that really helped crystallize things for me. So definitely check that out.
Caroline, do you own a CryptoKitty?
I don't, but I did actually just recently bought an NFT of a piece of art. Yes.
So I had everybody at my company one day, they thought I was just completely mad. We did the whole CryptoKitty segment. And by doing that exercise, everybody learned so many real basic things about, tokens, ERC-21s versus 20, how to buy ETH, how to watch it, how to open a wallet. So the people that created that from that advertising agency, I mean, they're laughing all the way to the bank. They have made so much money by creating a game so that people could understand about the underlying fundamentals. So if you have not bought a CryptoKitty, I think it's worth the $5 or however much it costs now to open one.
I'm gonna do it. Let's all try to do it. Let's all check back
Absolutely.
and see everybody in the audience too. I'm sure Bennett and you guys have already started
Probably.
giving some little how-tos on that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Melissa, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, my question's for Maryanne. Well, there's two things. First, my best friend from high school actually interns for Ninth Gear over the summer. I realized, I recognized the name and I made
Who is it?
Her name's Rachel O'Brien. I'm not sure.
Oh, I love Rachel. Oh, she was great.
Yeah, she absolutely loved her experience. I actually asked her about it. I was like, this looks really interesting. Can you tell me about it? She loved it. And second, my question was that of course, the intraday asset class is extremely attractive for being low risk, that the funds will be defaulted on, being that it's a short period, that it's lent out. I was wondering, what risks do you see for the asset class? And do you see any opportunities for it being lent out to those that might not have like the highest credit rating, and maybe for a borrower with a lower credit rating?
So that's a great question, Melissa, and thank you. This is getting really into the underworkings of what we do, and I'm happy you can call me, just direct message me, and then we can get on a call. But we've introduced intraday lending so that it's an alternative balance sheet for an institution. So we have deconstructed a traditional transaction into trading and credit, and the credit piece we toss over to a $1 trillion plus money manager. They like it because they're not part of this transaction today. So they now are able to take this and create velocity inside of this bag. So they get 20 to 48 basis points over their overnight rate, which in today's environment, when interest rates are near zero, is a substantial amount. We take hairstop risk or settlement risk and we eliminate that, but we do throw the risk over to the shareholders in the fund. And these companies are all known, and they're very large corporations that are using this. So while there is risk, it's completely condensed because they're only borrowing it for a very short duration versus 48 hours. So we do kick the risk over into the shareholders of this fund, but it's actually lowering the overall risk and lowering capital requirements, and allowing for money to be used and have immediate use of funds versus having to wait 48 hours plus. So I'm happy to talk about that with anybody that wants to get into the weeds on that. But Melissa, you really understood what we're doing. So congratulations, call me and you should intern with us.
Thank you. Yes, I could send you a LinkedIn connection. I'll definitely like to keep in touch. Thank you.
We need you to do a workshop, Maryanne.
Anytime.
We would love to have you back, and thank you, Melissa, for that question. We probably have time for one or two more questions. This question is from Alex. So what do you think the biggest bottleneck or constraint is in terms of pushing more women into blockchain goes?
I think that I often find a lot of women are just uncomfortable in finance. I mean, for someone who's grown up in that world, it's hard for me to sort of fathom, but I think that's a big bottleneck, that maybe it doesn't have the same ring to what they're used to. I've asked myself that question, why don't if I was in college, I'd be jumping for these courses. Or trying to get more knowledge about it. I don't know. I think it's just this fear factor, or maybe it's out of your comfort zone, a little bit, that maybe it's too technical. There are some very technical aspects of it. But the thing that I think is so interesting is there are so many aspects that are not technical about this, the whole payment space, the onboarding, the offboarding. I mean, Maryanne talked about it, Kristin talked about it. There is, the talent that is going to be required for this industry. They may exist now, but it's enormous. And, get on the bandwagon. That's my message. Just go ahead. None of us have the answers. We are all, right? I mean, we don't have the answers. We're all learning every day. I learned something from this.
Kristin, would you like to go?
Yeah, I think it's similar. It's like any role where you feel like, it's kind of what Maryanne said. She was in an honors AP class and she was the only female, and it's hard to be in that environment because, I mean, quite frankly, I love having friends of every different way, but sometimes it's nice to be around people that are like you. And if you're in a career where you're not around that, it's hard, right? And so, that's why it's so important. I think I'd ask it back to the students, like, encourage your friends, right? I think David asked a great question. How can allies make sure that, we encourage each other and stuff? Some of the best folks in my career have been the men that sat in the room and say, Kristin, what do you think? When they're sitting around a table with all the male bankers and nobody's making eye contact to me, they actually sit there and they don't answer the question. They actually stop and ask, what do you think, right? And so, I would encourage you guys as students to actually try to bring your friends and people that are really talented into that field, encourage them to try blockchain. It can seem scary. To Lynne's point, explain what it is in like human terms so people understand and it becomes less scary. Have them reach out to us and ask questions. We'll dumb it down for anybody so that they don't feel intimidated by it. And that's kind of how it naturally grows and you get more people into that space, right?
Thank you, Kristin. Right, any other advice from Caroline and Maryanne?
I was just going to say that that I think that we also can't forget that there are many women who are actually in adjacent, whether it be majors or study, and they may have explored the computer science. I will say that as a discipline in colleges, it's only been really recent that the computer science track is a little less about, we're gonna, teach you how to be a developer versus actually teaching you about computing and what it can do and how the applications work. But just-in-time learning, accelerated learning, bootcamp, any of those things I think are in your favor, because you don't have to take the old age idea of what it would take to become a professional in this space in a traditional undergraduate major, having everything all lined up. So leaning on a lot of those just-in-time learning options, I think is something that it can really allow you to accelerate to it faster, but also learn these things as they are being developed, because higher ed is changing and all of it is changing. So, yeah.
Also, learn Python, learn how to code in Solidity. You don't have to take 10 classes in it, but just take a basic class, because having those different skills will help you, especially in management, so that you can read down, you can look at GitHub, you'll be able to read some code and it's not all Greek to you. It's really important to have some fundamental basics in learning how to program.
Thank you, Maryanne. Thank you, all of our speakers, for coming today.
Can I have one more plug?
Yep, go ahead.
Maryanne Morrow mentioned Christian Carlo, who was at the CFTC, just wrote a book. We, Boston Blockchain Association, are having him speak on November 4th. So sign up. Yes. Yep. So we're very excited about it.
Is it in person? Is he coming to visit you?
No, unfortunately it's virtual, but.
I'm going to come. I love him. I heart Chris.
Yeah, thank you all. And for all the speakers, feel free to send me or Bennett any resources or any links that you'd like to share to our students. As I mentioned earlier, we will come up with a Medium page link to send out, and it will be on our link tree. So if anyone wants to get in touch with our speakers, check our Medium page tomorrow. All right, so in terms of updates for the Blockchain Club, we have another event on Wednesday with Delta Sigma Pi on Crypto 101. We also have another event next Monday talking about the art of crypto research. So make sure to RSVP in our link tree. And I hope everyone have a great night, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.